Good evening. We'll continue with our department head meetings. John, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we're going to review the city clerks, the elections, city manager, mayor and council budget, human resources, finance, treasurer, assessor, and then after that, we're going to have the first budget hearing. And so we have a pretty busy schedule tonight. The first budget we'll hear from is the city clerk's budget, and we have our city clerk here. And city clerk's budget is on page 65. And I'm going to turn it over to the city clerk now for her general statements, and then we can take any questions you might have.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So this is the budget that I presented. One of the things that I did not receive and that I asked for was, for the office was, and maybe it was my mistake, I asked for another full-time clerk. We share a records clerk. It doesn't seem to be working out. I got that asked last time and the time before, and it's just not working out. We need the person to be a full-time person. In the budget, it got to be a person and a half. I just would like another full-time records clerk for the office, and that's what I'm asking for.
Yes, Alderman Wilson, please.
Good evening. Of course, thank you, and honestly, thank your office for all that they deal with. I know firsthand the stress that you are under in your office, helping last year during crazy time with the primary elections and all of what you have to do on top of everything else. The question that I have when it comes to the records clerk, I know you have some very, very busy times during the year, on top of course, the busy time that you're sharing, I believe, with finance, correct? You guys are splitting the records clerk?
Well, we try to split. I haven't had that person in my office since December, the first week of December of last year, due to hiring and leaving and position moving and different things.
So
I
on,
haven't had one.
on a normal schedule of a year, what time period would that person normally be in your office?
Well, Carlene and I get together and we put a calendar together where I can have the person for 3 weeks and then she gets it for 3 weeks. So we just try to put a calendar together on my busy times, and my busy times seem to be her busy times. So there's no set time or day. Like June and July are dog months for me, and the end of June and July are tax season.
Okay.
So I give her the person for tax season. Same thing with elections. Elections doesn't end
Oh, yeah.
election day. So we try to work together to share a person, but only having a person for 3 weeks or even a month at a time, and then that person going to another office, you can't train them correctly and all the other things that go along with it. It's very hard to do.
So, and I will say, so I'm guessing it, for that individual to do some of the larger projects or larger lifting, the clerk's office has to deal with, is kind of hard when you're doing it 3 weeks at a time. And some of those things are much more of an expansive, time-consuming thing that takes probably more than that. So the stop and the start doesn't help you in a sense that then it's a backlog of some of the other work that has to get done in the office, right or wrong.
Correct. That's absolutely correct.
Okay. So you're essentially looking for an additional full-time records clerk.
Correct. No, just, if I have a half a person now, I want to have the other half of that person to make it one whole full-time person.
So is the half a person the revenue collection clerk?
Correct.
So you would want that to be a full-time position, but as a records clerk?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm only looking for a half a person because I already have a half a person. I'm looking for the other half.
Okay. So, and I'm just trying to think. So in your budget, of course, it has the revenues clerk, collection clerk as half. So we would get rid of that revenues clerk half, and it would just become a whole under the records clerk.
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other members' question? Yes, Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you. So, Betsy, not to beat that last topic to death, but I'm sure, looking at titles, it wouldn't make a lot of difference if that person was half a records clerk and half a revenue clerk, or just a 1.0 records clerk, right? We're just talking about adding a half a person. I know that, I get that's what you're saying, even though that's not what's listed here. Well, my question goes to, when you look at the next group down and you say what the salaries are, right? So taking that revenue collections clerk and making that person a full-time records clerk, it's not, how best to say it, it's, we're not taking a person and then doubling them, or doubling their workload, or increasing their workload, right? But we're not doubling their salary and fringes, or,
They'd make the same as my clerk now, and right now in sharing the position, that person makes what my clerks make now. The tax collector revenue clerk and my clerks make the same amount of money. I'm only getting half of that right now. Am I saying that correctly, Josh?
well, you're probably saying it correctly, I'm just probably not understanding it correctly. It's on me, not on you. So this revenue collections clerk is in...
Makes 23,674 right now.
Right.
That's the part I get.
But the revenues collection clerk is listed as a 0.5 person in your budget, but that 0.5 is, what is that person doing in your office during that 0.5?
Well, things like answering the phone, we have to train them to answer the phone. They're giving out birth certificates, is that what you mean? What is
No,
it?
it's not. I'm saying, so what's a general job description of a revenue collections clerk?
I don't know what the revenue collection clerk does, that's not my office. Mine's a records clerk. Is that what you mean?
So I'm looking at page 65, under staffing, bottom item, revenue collection clerk, 0.5.
So those two positions are, there's a distinction between them in the City Hall bargaining unit contract. The skills and duties are similar, so they have the same pay scale, but they're two different job descriptions. So the revenue collection clerk, the primary responsibility is to learn how to collect property taxes and work in the tax collection office. But we worked out the arrangement where the person can also learn and assist in the city clerk's office. And that's the shared position that Betsy's talking about.
So the revenue collection clerk should have a slash and say records clerk also.
Yeah, I'm not worried
That's what you're
about...
asking.
Yeah, all right, that's fine. So,
But in the union contract, it's the revenue collection clerk.
okay, and yeah, and that helps me understand, but, and that 0.5 person makes half of this 47,348.
In my office, they make the other half in the tax office. So they make a total of 47,348. Half in my office gets charged, and half in the tax office gets charged.
So would the gist of this be that that this would become a 1.0 FTE in your office, and the tax collector would have to find another 0.5 person to do what that person does in the tax collector's office?
Correct. So that means I would, if it went through, I would have a full-time, and she would right now have a part-time.
And the increase, the net increase would just be half of, whatever half of
Would be
47,348 is.
23,674.
Okay, all right. I guess that's where I was trying to weave to, is, how much more money are we actually talking about here? For
23,674.
Right, for the benefit of having that person work, in your office full-time. Right, okay, thank you.
Clerk? Alderman Betcourt.
The, part of the issue is that this is not just going to be one position that's impacted, I think, too. So we're going to have to address the other side of the coin that Alderman DeLucia just mentioned. So obviously, even if you took that one person, then they would have to hire another body to be part-time if that type of position is even available. I don't know in their CBA how all that works, but that's another kettle of fish. So we might wind up having to, fill the rest of that position too, if it came down to that. So that could be that would be a bit of a problem probably. I can appreciate, obviously, I think we all got the letters that your staff wrote. I'm greatly appreciative of those. I don't dispute that there's the need. I just want us to, if we make any change, that we probably need to just have our eyes wide open, that there's, little more than just doing your, adding a 0.5 on your end. We're going to have to deal with the repercussions of that also. And that may be doable. But that's my 2 cents right now. But I like I said, I appreciate your need. Definitely going to take a look at it. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Alderman Gould? Alderman Gould?
Thank you. So you talked about the scheduling. Is there a better way to do the scheduling, Betsy, that would work out better rather than you having her for 3 weeks and then she goes to finance for 3 weeks and back to you for 3 weeks? Is there a better way to schedule it to make her more helpful in your office? Or this person, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but
It's just hard either way. You start them on something, even if it's a month. We sometimes try to do a month at election time. I try to get the person, elections are usually in November, I try to have the person the whole month of October, the whole month of November, and half of December. Well, that takes a whole person out of the tax office for 2.5 months, and it becomes difficult on them. So that means I've used up 2.5 months already. So I have to be very careful and deliberate where I put that person for 3.5 more months. Well, no, I don't even have it that much. So I have to be very deliberate where my busy times are. And that last year, we had a primary and an election
all right,
that I didn't get the extra help for because that was tax time for the tax office.
right.
The year before, or 2 years before, we had the tax that came in October. So I missed having that person, we had delayed taxes, so I missed that person at that election time. And it is a lot to train somebody for my office. It's not just one thing that we do a variety of things, and you have to be very cautious on what you're doing because you don't want to give out the wrong thing to the wrong person, which is easy to do.
Right.
Example, I had to call up Edie today, who is the new person in the collections office, to speak Spanish to answer a phone call about a birth certificate, and it took her 22 minutes on the phone with this person. She doesn't know anything about my office, but that's sometimes how long it takes to explain to a person what he needed to get his birth certificate.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wilson?
This may not be so much a question for the city clerk, but more so probably for either Josh or John. The part-time individual now, so a part-time individual as a revenue clerk, let's just say that, would that come with fringe benefits?
Yes, yeah.
And about how much would that be?
I would say that, one half of a position and with wages and fringe is probably more like $40,000 total.
So both with salary and fringe?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Looking
Question for John, if I may. We spoke earlier today. The budget as printed actually calls for adding additional 1 1/2 positions in the clerk.
Yes, it says 5.5. The request really was for another half, so.
Correct.
Should have said 5 instead of 5.5.
So currently, the bottom line on this department is inflated by that additional
Half
half.
on this.
The request
Yeah.
is,
Yes, yeah, okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that was my fault.
No, I didn't bring that up for that reason. Just if other members here are looking
No,
at the numbers and
I had noticed that.
understand the need, so, which I think we all do. Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll just ask, on the position that exists now, the shared position, is there an MOU with the union on that? That concerns that, the shared services?
Yes.
All right. So that's going to complicate things also then, I assume?
Yeah, but I guess depending on whether half a position is added or a full position is added, yeah.
Well, I'm just talking about because if you add it on one side, then the position becomes a part-time. The other half of it would exist by itself, as far as that end of it. So that's I don't know if that would violate the MOU or not. And obviously, I don't know anything about it, so. I'll ask, this is some other person in the back there that might be able to shed some light on that. But, all right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're all set. Thank you very much, Betsy.
Thank you.
Next is the elections budget. Page 70. I'm gonna let the registrars make comments on their budget. I'm gonna just defer to them at this point.
The microphone a little closer, please.
Is that better?
Thank you.
We're actually a little bit confused because the city manager has presented us with a proposed budget of 165,068, which we both felt was definitely adequate for our needs. And then they came back with a lesser budget, so we're a little confused, but, why they gave us two different budgets. But the proposed budget of 160,571 should be sufficient for our needs. We do expect, because it's a mayoral election this year, we do expect that there probably will be a primary or two. And of course, we'll have the general election. And because of COVID and the PPE and all that other stuff that we have to have, it has raised our costs considerably over what we've had to do before. Plus, we had to hire a lot more people, especially because of the absentee ballot stuff that the governor has done. So it is larger than other municipal budgets that we've had before, but there are reasons for that. And the reason why the 2021 projected budget isn't higher than it is because we did get money from the state to cover some of the PPE, and we did get a $26,000 grant. So those things covered the additional employees that we had to hire. And I must say that we have to thank the fire department because they provided us with masks and shields for both the primary and the election. So that helped us out a lot. I really don't see anything that we need to, oh yeah, we did ask for a line item for our deputies. Because they are, it says seasonal and temporary, deputies are not. They are appointed by us, by statute, and they are deputies for as long as we ask them to serve. So they're basically, they are employees. They're not temporary or seasonal. So we asked to have a line item for that so that there's that distinction, and it's a different line item that they're getting paid out of them from the seasonal. And also it's less confusing because personnel seems to get that mixed up. And they need to understand that they are employees. We use them year round. We don't necessarily use them every day or every week, but we do use them as needed. For instance, we're just finishing up the canvas, which is huge. This year we sent out about 3,500 letters. And those all it's a complicated process to get them out and to get them back in and process them. So we've used the deputies. Diane's deputy is new, so she's been working with us to learn the job. And my deputy has been invaluable to me. I'm not young anymore, and I do have some physical limitations. So Linda is able to do a lot of the things that I can't do. So we do ask, if possible, to have a separate line item in here for our deputies, just to make that distinction between them and the seasonal employees. Other than that, we're fine with what we have here.
Alderman DeLucia.
So, I know that this last election season was rough on everybody, specifically the clerk's office. There was a number of us spent time in the clerk's office processing absentee ballot requests, right?
And that comes out of our budget. All of it was spent, everything that was spent extra in the clerk's office, everything that had to do with absentee ballots came out of our budget.
Well, that's not where I was going with that, because we volunteered our time to sit there and go through those things. We didn't, we weren't looking to collect any money for that. We were just trying to help out, and I know it was appreciated. My question is, is there man hours that could be brought to bear? Because I don't see that the need for that kind of absentee ballot processing volume to go down in any time in the near future with the upcoming election cycle, and not just the next one that's going to come up in November, but for the foreseeable future, people are just going to decide to use.
Absentee ballots are completely the purview of the city clerk's office.
I'm sorry?
Absentee ballots are only handled by the city clerk's office. We have nothing to do with the absentee ballots until election day.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is that if the three of us can volunteer our time, right? Are there people in your under your umbrella that could that could be used to help out the clerk's office?
Election, people cannot handle absentee ballots until election day. So if we use people to process the absentee ballots in advance of the election, we won't be able to use them on election day.
Right, but I don't remember opening anybody's absentee ballot. We were just handling the requests for, right, absentee ballots, the qualifiers, whatever those forms are called, no?
I think, Betsy, can you, is Betsy here? Can you explain that a little better?
Please, if you, yeah.
So sorry, she's right in that. So absentee ballots are handled in my office, and nobody that works in Diane's office can handle them until I give them to their office. So we can't have volunteers, unfortunately, that can help in my office and help in their office with absentees. Does that
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
that question? Yeah, unfortunately, we had some very good volunteers that worked for Diane and Diane that said, we can help you, but the law doesn't allow it.
Okay, just trying to find a creative solution to the bigger problem in that the shared person is busy elsewhere when you need that person, you know, leading up to an election. So if it's not possible.
Unfortunately, we don't have the option to share people for that purpose. We have to keep our election workers separate. Those who work at polling places have to be separate from those who could work in Betsy's office. There are times when we would love to be able to share some of our best people and her best people because they're good and they know the process, but we just can't. It's not allowed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Alderman Wilson.
Just a small question. So I know you talked about the deputy registrar's line item. So in the budget, it has, of course, that amount. All you're looking for is that to be moved from the seasonal as its own line item.
Yes, I believe that we have a fourth seasonal here, also encompasses what we pay the deputies. So we're just asking to break it out from there as a separate line item.
Okay, so,
Not asking for more money.
correct. So you're just taking that out of the total amount
Yes.
to make it a separate line item. Thank you.
Other questions? Yep, Alderman Benko.
I will note that he does have it separated out underneath, you know, under election workers on page 70 there, so,
That's, that's just a breakdown of what we pay
Right.
on election days. But the deputies make more than that
oh, okay,
throughout the year.
all right. That's only with the, regarding the election, the actual election expense then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next budget is now it's working. The switch wasn't working, it's working now. Next budget is the city manager's budget. It's on page
53.
53. Well, there's a major change in the city manager's budget, as you are probably all aware. For lack of a good place to place the new position of what I was calling a fire services director, it has numerous titles at this point. We've budgeted it for 75% of the year, or hiring at October 1st. So realizing that we probably wouldn't hire the position right away. That's the big change in regular employees. So we've increased the budget by $105,000 plus appropriate fringe benefits. Other than that, the budget is pretty much the same as previous years. Take any questions.
Alderman Wilson.
Just a small question. So for CCM, I noticed it's 25,000 across the board. Could you explain what the reasoning behind, I see it was budgeted in 2021 at 18 and projected at 12?
They, because of the coronavirus, they ended up feeling sorry for all the municipalities, so they only billed half the year. So it was a one-time discount for the year because of the crisis.
Okay, thank you. Well, the second question I have, I know we are talking whatever the title is at this point for the fire service director in your budget. I see the salary, of course, is $140,000. What would fringe be for that position?
I didn't hear the last part.
What would be the fringe benefit cost for that position?
The fringe benefits are, I'd have to break out the 195, it's probably like about 50 to 60,000.
Thank you.
Other questions? Alderman Gould.
Well, I think you know my feeling on whatever we're calling this fire service director, et cetera, et cetera. For $190,000, we could get a, let me get the name right, a records clerk or a half-time records clerk and somebody else in finance, and we would solve two problems right away, and we'd still have money left over for something else. Maybe there's another department that needs a half-time employee. I think it's a lot of money to spend on, and would this position be an at-will employee?
Yes.
Okay. And where is this person's office going to be located? And will this person need support staff? Or does he answer his own phone? Or does he need a secretary? Or getting mileage reimbursement? I mean, this is going to be a $200,000 a year job plus. And I think we have other places that we could spend the money and alleviate some of the angst that is going on in our other departments. And maybe that's more of a comment than a question, so.
There are some real questions in there, though. Contradicted. I thought it was proper to put it in the budget to have the council debate it. It's easier to remove something than to add it later on. So better to see the big picture with it in, and then the council, in their wisdom, will decide whether to fill it or not. So if we didn't have the study and it didn't make that recommendation, I wouldn't be over here now recommending it.
All set?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I'll take a shot. You say at will. Whose will? You, the city manager?
Yeah, it would report to me, so it would be a department head, not in the union. So it would be like Josh's level, and it would be those, under those auspices.
Connecticut's an at-will state anyway. Almost all states are. But the issue is whether it'd be covered under a CBA. Now, you might not, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but
Go ahead.
the,
Going where I was.
the fact of, I mean, right now, it's not part of, a bargaining unit, but those things can change.
Well, I wouldn't have it in the bargaining
Yeah.
unit.
Is that subject to challenge by the union?
Well, they certainly can do that, but I
Yeah.
would fight that
Okay.
very, very vigorously, they say. I would fight that very hard.
Yeah, no, I think part of the issue, though, is the nature of the duties are not necessarily,
I think they're
supervisory.
I
You think,
they're not necessarily just the fire, and the fire chief is not part of the union.
Yeah.
The state law allows you to separate those from the union. I frankly don't think that this would be an issue with the union. The only union that really would, there might be two unions that want to try to grab the position, possibly the fire department, which that's one of the reasons the salaries are high, because it supervises the fire chief. And the second would be the department head union.
but it doesn't really supervise the fire chief.
Excuse me?
The position really wouldn't
So you would have authority over the chief.
over in various things, yeah, but
Yeah.
the fire chief is still your direct report, though, wouldn't they?
Well, that's to be determined. We really haven't made a final decision on that yet.
Wouldn't that have to be codified in the ordinance?
It would be.
Just to finish up, that's a lot of money in a time when we're still concerned about mill rate impact, taxes, and everything else. I understand why the salary has to be above that of the actual paid fire chief, because he has supervisory authority in some cases. But I still contend we could do all of this by simply the city manager and the chief's meeting every single month. If it has to become a policy decision under someone's purview, so be it. If it's the council, it's the council, or it could be the city manager himself. But that's a lot of money. Go ahead, Alderman Betancourt.
The fact of the matter is, a lot of the things in the fire study are going to take a lot of work, a lot of man-hours, more than even at least the full-time position that we're talking about here. And then hopefully the goal here is that ultimately the position would save money. So, I mean, every year we go through this process, and rightfully so. And that position would have to be evaluated just like every other position to make sure that it's, doing what we intended it to do, what we intended to do. So, again, we haven't even decided on an ordinance, codifying the position yet. So, I think we got a ways to go here. But I believe that if we are serious about improving the fire service and taking up the issues in the study, then that one position is, I think it's indisputable that that position would be necessary in order to accomplish those things. So, otherwise, we're wasting our time.
Well, there are a lot of things on the checklist as far as the study.
Right.
So,
That position would be responsible for, essentially.
yeah, I mean, it would add a lot of probably unmanageable added duties to the city manager's office, because at this point, it's going to be a place I see that it would be logical to place those duties in. There's no other department that really can do that. I just want to make it clear that this is I have a history here of not having assistants and things like that. This is, in fact, we used to have an assistant manager, and I never refilled it. I try to run lean on this. This isn't because I think it deserves the debate of the council and if it wasn't in there, you'd probably debate it anyway, and might have to add it. I'd rather ratchet it down than ratchet up, so that's why it's in there.
Well, tonight's not for debate of the issue, but if savings are the goal, you can start by saving about $200,000 and have faith in the city manager and the chiefs. Someone else, I thought I saw a hand. Alderman Wilson.
Kind of going into the line of, and this is just me going back to our prolonged discussion with the Board of Ed on Tuesday night. It's been a lot of nights. And, you know, one, of course, as you said, this may not be the moment to debate it, but I think, you know, we had a long probing discussion with the Board of Ed about their spending and several of the new positions that they were proposing, and how they were spending, you know, savings, all of those other wonderful things. And I think it's appropriate time to have somewhat of that discussion as we're asking questions about the budget. But I would think, you know, as Alderman Betancourt has said, looking at this position to be reviewed annually, and we'd look to see if it is saving things, and if it's not, it's up for, of course, discussion with it being an at-will position of not necessarily being what the position panned out to be. But I think having, as Mr. Salomon has said, having discussion on what it looks like in the budget now, and asking the questions is important. I mean, that's one of the reasons I asked the question about fringe benefits, because it's looking at the whole picture instead of coming back and asking questions after we've presented all of the facts to the public, you know? So I think this was him being not only fiscally responsible, but also being transparent about things that could come to the table, so that every resident, before we even have our first public hearing on the budget, understand what's in it, what could come forward. So I do appreciate you for at least putting it on the table as something that, as you said, is going to be debated whether or not it was in this budget or not. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that is the reason that I placed it in there. I think it'd be better to have a good dialogue on it prior to the council making a decision, so you have it up front. I will tell you that the position in every case won't save money. It may be more public safety oriented and encourage other fire practices that are not necessarily being accomplished now. So can you put a dollar amount on that? It's not the same as how many truants or people you can get out of town. That's a very easy measurement. It's much more difficult to say what kind of contributions would this position make to the overall public safety issue within the fire services. That's much harder to measure.
Alderwoman Gould.
All right, so then maybe I'll go back now and ask the question. So we hire this person. Where is this person's office going to be?
Haven't been determined yet.
So we have to create some office space.
Yeah, well, we definitely would, yeah.
And what about support staff? Does this person, this assistant city manager, superintendent, whatever you want to call them, need support staff?
I try to do it within the structure we have, unless I couldn't. So the answer is, my first choice would be not to add support staff and do it within the individuals that we have now. If I can't do that, then I would tell you that.
So that could add another $50,000 on there if he needs a secretary.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't put in the budget this year because we're not going to hire till October, and then the person has to kind of get their feet wet. So you wouldn't necessarily need a person right away. You'd be able to assist it through other personnel, hopefully. But ultimately, it might need, especially if it was very busy.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you. So John, I would also like to thank you for putting this in your budget so that we as a council have room to debate the issue of having a director of the fire services or whatever the title is going to be, right? And not have to, then think, okay, now how are we going to pay for it because we didn't make sure it was in the budget in case we decided it moved forward. So, thank you for doing that. I know that it is a lot of money, and it looks like, it hangs out there and grabs your attention, but to your point, and you said it very well, it's easier to subtract than it is to add when it comes to building a budget, and so this demonstrates forethought and your responsiveness to our vision as it evolves. And when I say our, the Public Safety Committee's vision and the council as a whole. I'll also say that this is not the time or the place to debate whether we're going to go this route or not, although I agree with Pro Tem Betancourt that the study has given us a lengthy list of tasks that cannot be added to your workload. I've already mentioned to you, and I'll say this for everybody who's listening, I've already had people approach me who do not have skin in the game other than the fact that they are taxpayers, say to me that if managing the recommendations in the fire study takes up 25%, this person said, one person that got into the weeds with me on the numbers said even if it takes up 20% of the city manager's time, that's too much. Then if it's at that, if it's going to take that much work, it needs to be a single person who's going to be held accountable for making sure that the items in the fire study that this council puts forward get done. So, this is going to evolve, all right? And for members of the council who were present last night in the public safety meeting, you heard me say that, some of the things from the fire study, the low-hanging fruit, as some people have termed it, have already been forwarded to the city manager, and in hopes that the 6 chiefs will meet with the city manager and start to discuss some of those items, the things that they can that they can get working on right away and find consensus and give us feedback. And again, so the whole thing starts with conversations instead of dictates from this council. However, there are structural issues in our fire service with regard to human resources, with regard to purchasing, with regard to overall policy and procedures that to date have not been able to been corrected by the 6 chiefs and the city manager, and it's not just the city manager. We're talking going back 4 city managers as far as 20 years. So, having said that, again, these are the reasons why we asked the city manager to seriously consider putting this in his budget. Again, I appreciate the fact that it's there, and now we have the latitude to design whatever it is going to happen moving forward. There are always options, but at least now, because of this proposed budget, we also have this option, and I believe that was the most important thing. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Actually, I have one more question
Okay.
about the position itself. Have you found other cities and towns have something similar to this? And if so, they're in Connecticut?
Well, there's not as much on purely fire services, director of fire services. Usually the position is a public safety director, which sometimes includes both.
Okay.
There are some larger municipalities that have the position on it. The fire chief, so to speak, is the highest ranking line person, and then there is another person above that that would be administrative. So it's called different things in different places. But the most common is public safety director, which the police chief and the fire chief would report to.
Would they be subject to state reporting requirements as the city's fire marshal?
I didn't hear that.
Would they be subject to the state's reporting requirements?
Yes.
So just like the chiefs, that would also have to go to the state fire marshal's office?
No, I think that would go through the fire marshal's office. No, they would subordinate that to the proper authority right now, which would be the fire chief or fire marshal's office.
Okay.
Wouldn't create another layer like that, no.
Just trying to figure out how it would work.
Yeah, so am I.
Okay, thank
It's a
you.
work in progress, I would tell you that.
Thank you. We're all set on that, John. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, the next is mayor and city council, and that's on page 51. It's a very status quo budget, except for one line item. The Norwich Community Development Corporation requested a very large increase to the city's contribution of $275,000. At this point, I rejected that $275 and did increase it by $50,000 to $200. It's an interesting position because the city manager, as well as three council people, are on the board. So we're well aware of some of the difficulties of administering the department in its present state. And there's been talk of an additional administrative person. Now, I don't know, I'm assuming, and I really shouldn't assume this, but that the NPU will probably match whatever the city does, so there would be an infusion of 100,000 more in that account. Whether that's sufficient to do what they need to do, I don't know. Maybe they need to try to be more aggressive on program income to make up the difference. We are interviewing, as you know, a new president of NCDC, and that was one of the important questions that we've been asking is, how can you diversify revenue? Because right now, most of it is two items in the budget. So that's in there for 50,000 additional. Other than that, we've kept the marketing budget, which has been busy in the last few years since it's been added, and also the multicultural budget, which was not as active last year because of coronavirus, but should start to evolve into a more active situation this year. I don't know if the mayor wants to comment on this budget, so I'll defer to him at this point.
I would agree with what you said. I think NPU is somewhat waiting to see what we choose to do. They're also engaged in the financing of the investigation on whether or not to have another business park in the city. Those funds and the funds in this budget are restricted. They can spend up to 1% per year towards economic development, literally to develop the economics of the city and work with the private sector, but they can't go above the 1%. So whatever choices are made here, they're impacted by NPU's contribution and ours. The Global City match of what was $25,000 has been consistent. The bank's contribution this year was 50, not 100. The 100 was a commitment of 3 years, and the bank did in fact do that for 3 straight years. And that program is changing, evolving a little differently. They are directly working with a program that Jason began, the Vanilla Box, working with the private sector to renovate first floor storefronts in downtown. One of those is ongoing, 235 Main Street, I believe is the address. So whether or not festivals continue again, that's not necessarily so. But working with the diverse populations throughout the city to help them position minority-owned businesses in the city is really continuing. In fact, that's more of the emphasis now than having great social gatherings, which have their place as well. I guess that's what I would add, if there are questions.
Yeah, the only thing, the only other thing that may be a positive for the organization and for the city is the new funds that will be coming into the city after May from the federal government. Although we have not received detailed guidance on it, there may be some funds that are connected to economic development which may be utilized via NCDC with an infusion of some monies to continue some of the programs like the box program and some others and be funded that way. I'm hopeful that the guidance from the Treasury will allow us to consider that as an expenditure level with the grants.
Alderman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First question I have several, but for the line item for the school buildings, that 5,000, what does that go towards? Just any expense they may incur, or I'm just trying to put it into perspective.
Did you say school building?
The school buildings committee. Is a
Oh,
line item.
oh, yeah.
That's for mostly
Secretarial
for
duties.
secretarial
Recording minutes,
services,
things of that nature.
It's a pretty complicated committee, has a lot of, having a good amount of meetings and whatnot. So that's what it's mostly for.
Yep.
Okay, I just was making sure, because I know last year, in last year's budget, and I think we put it in the capital money for the
Yeah, this is
architect.
purely administrative for the committee itself.
And then, so my second question is looking at the multicultural program. I know we talked about global cities, and you alluded to, I know it was a 3-year commitment of 100,000. You said that there are 50,000 or whatnot this year. Moving, strategically changing, I'll say, how that program is looking. My question is do you see a time, as NCDC is revamping or changing or could change certain things with whoever is hired as president and whatnot, and I believe that program is somewhat under the NCDC, if I'm right or wrong? The
Yes,
global cities.
the director of that reports to the president of NCDC, who will hopefully be selected in the next month, the new person. But yes, that is correct.
So my question or concern would be, moving forward, and not so much just this year, but years from now, do we see, I'm guessing we'll continue to see a decline in the amount of money received from the bank possibly for these programs?
I can't speak to the bank's decision. They have people within their own organization that meet regularly with Suki Lagrito, and in this case, Fawn and Devon right now, and they go over benchmarks that they have put in place to be followed. I believe most of the funds for this fiscal year, which is ending in that particular line item, have not been spent because there wasn't a purpose to do that, particularly with the COVID restrictions and everything shutting down. That even affected marketing expenses. We were about to over a year ago now, there were newer ads being put together from the original 4. We did not continue that effort of marketing because the restaurants were ordered closed. So those funds weren't of any use. So we stopped doing that as well. And I believe those funds have been carried forward with the vendor who was working on that program. That's Maria Miranda. Those funds are now being repurposed in the Passport to Norwich program. So they will be done so in a marketing plan, and they're matched with the $25,000 grant we were able to gain from the State Tourism Board in the state of Connecticut. That's where those dollars sit now. Most of the monies for the global for this year did not go forward. Prior years, we used those for some permanent improvements, electrical areas in the city of Norwich in order to hold festivals. You used to have to string these extension cords, plug them inside a building. Not necessarily the best way to do that, to power the needs outside on the streets. So we added some junction boxes and conduit to City Hall in 2 different locations. We've done it on Main Street, a couple locations, so that those areas where they can then put the spider boxes, which they paid for it out of at NCDC, which allows for multiple use for electric needs. Depending on whatever festival or event is taking place throughout downtown, we tried to improve the infrastructure. A real permanent use of those dollars.
Thank you. And just the reason I ask the question is, one thing I would hope that would continue is some festivals, in a sense, repurposed to have a connection to business. And the reason I say that is I look at some of the businesses that have come here, whether they're food trucks or brick and mortar, whatever. Some of them have come based off of, and I'm looking at the cultural implications. Some of them came just from being a vendor at some of these events. And I think it has a direct correlation to, as we continue to foster that relationship with our different cultures in Norwich and providing an opportunity of what's going on in that we're welcomed here in the city. I think there can be a great partnership that is made when it's done right to partner the two together. The other thing I will say is it's good to know that NCDC is also continuing to look at other ways to bring in revenue. I think that's another important thing. I know they've got a lot that they're trying to do, and it's important to know that they're not just counting on the contributions we make to the city, but also looking to continue to expand on what they are able to bring in. So thank you.
You're welcome. Questions? Thank you.
Okay. We'll now move on to Human Resources. That's page 63. We have Director of Human Resources, Bridget Marks here. I will comment, and Bridget will comment with more detail. The major increase in this budget is in professional services, and Bridget will break down why that's increased now. So why don't you talk a little bit about that one and some other items?
Okay. Yes, professional services, there's an increase there. Some of the items are uncontrollable increases in minor things like the CDL drug testing and our testing bank. But the major increase is I am respectfully requesting the reinstatement of $20,000 for our diversity initiatives. That was cut, I want to say around fiscal year 18-19. And what that money is used for is I work with the local high schools, Norwich Tech and NFA, and for example, I'll work with Leo Butler, or I have worked with him in the past, and he identifies students of diversity, and we have a paid summer internship program where I place students throughout the city to work in various departments. I have not done that since the budget was cut, other than last year, definitely not because of COVID. But before COVID, I was able to get NPU to fund maybe 1 or 2 positions for me because the other money was cut. So that $20,000 would go towards that program. And there was also a slight increase in my professional development, which is for HR trainings in my department, and there's 2 of us that are coming up for recertification this year, so I put that money in there so we could get the appropriate courses that we needed.
Thank you. Questions, members? Alderman Wilson?
So first, thank you for being here tonight. I want to say I appreciate you putting the information in of those things that are necessary, including the testing and recertification information. I will say I am a strong supporter, and I've said this to the city manager about the diversity initiative. One thing that I continue to stress to individuals is we as elected officials, preach to kids and to go to school, get an education, come back and, support them and getting involved in government, public service. And this is a way for us to kind of incentivize them understanding what happens in government in different offices. So taking that initiative and trying to diversify our workforce even more and giving opportunities to some of these high school students is appreciated, but also goes a long way in helping some of them really understand the knit and grit of what goes on in many of the offices here. So I'm definitely a big supporter and proponent of that, so thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Delusha.
Thank you. Hi, Bridget.
Hello.
So I was looking at your workload outputs numbers, and just a little bit of quick math, and it seems that under the workload, the total NPU employees is about 35% of the total employees if you add the city employees and NPU employees together. Would you say that your office spends about 35% of its time on human resources support of the utility?
Well, we're the backbone of human resources for NPU. When they need support, I'm always getting called, for questions and whatnot, but we do just about all human resources for them. I mean, they may do the nitty-gritty of interviewing the candidates when they get a list from us. We do the recruitment for them. We do the pension for them. We don't do their benefits administration. Their finance department does that. So we are their backbone. So I would say we might do more than 35%.
Of your staff's time is spent,
Correct.
okay? And you would, what percentage of the total workload, HR workload for NPU are you doing? Because you just said most of, so is it 75%, 80? And a ballpark figure would be fine.
Yeah, that's hard for me to break down. There's a lot of facets within HR. So again, we don't do their benefits administration. We don't do their workers' compensation. It's difficult to break down. I'm not sure. I can't answer that right now. I have to think about it. Is there something, another way you could ask, or what you're getting at?
The next question that leads me to is not a question for you. It
Okay.
really is a question for them. So, I guess I'll have to go to one of their meetings to ask that question. But I just wanted to have a clear picture that made sense to this data that you provided, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other questions? All set, thank you.
Thank you.
The next three budgets will complete our presentations tonight, and they are in finance, treasurer, and assessor. And I'm going to turn it over to Josh now for the comments, and then we'll take any questions that you might have.
Good evening, everybody. I guess the major things to point out in the finance budget this year is a good portion of the increase is related to two positions that were funded for a portion of this fiscal year that are funded for the full year in the proposed 2021-22 budget. That's a revenue collection clerk and the accountant position. It was assumed that those would be held open for a bit. One thing I'd like to note about next fiscal year, challenge that I might run into is that Deputy Comptroller Tony Madera is expecting to probably retire within the next year or so. So when I know that, an exact date, I think it would be wise to hire someone about 3 months ahead of time to work with him so we can transfer the knowledge to the next person. It might not be as necessary in other years where half the people in my office have less than 1 year of experience, but this is one of those times where I think that extra transition time would be good.
I may add on that, if I may, that we're going to be receiving over 2 years over $25 million from the federal government, and we know that they're going to have lots of responsibilities for reporting on that. So it's a good thing, but it will require financial records administration and whatnot, and that's a lot of administration. That's a lot of money. So I want to be careful that we have a good transition on that. Tony does a lot of those grants, special grants, things like that. So that's kind of his area of expertise. So we want to be able to have a good transition in that.
Thank you. Questions? No. No questions.
Treasurer is on
Please,
page 60.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just one second. Just, Josh, I just wanted to say that, because I hadn't said this to you before, and I made a note, and I must have lost a note. Personally, I'd like to say I appreciate the amount of work that you and your department have been doing lately with the requests that have come from us, right? Specifically from me and the ad hoc committee, and you're always, forgive the phrase, Johnny on the spot with the hard numbers and the information that we're asking for, and you're on top of it. And so I just wanted to take a moment and recognize and thank you for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. The next budget is page 60. It's a treasurer. I have the treasurer to my left, and I'll
Ask during.
turn it over to him for any comments that he would have, and then we'll take any questions you might have.
It's pretty much the same as it's been. There's an assistant to the treasurer that works for me, and both she and I are the only ones that have access to funds, so it's two important positions. And then we have the accounting assistant who does primarily the day-to-day functions, journal entries, miscellaneous accounting, assists on reconciliations, and so forth.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. It's not so much a question for the treasurer. This is actually a question for Josh. It just dawned on me as we were switching. Going back, I just wanted to know, I know you guys took on doing payroll for Norwich Public Schools in this fiscal year. With the staff that you currently have, is it adequate for you to continue to do that payroll job and whatnot, and how is that going?
So I actually wrote up, is this coming through okay?
Yep.
I wrote up a summary of our experience with the transitioning the payroll over to the finance office. And in it, one of the things that I'm recommending to do, I'm actually hiring for it now, is to pay for one additional accounting generalist for 12 to 18 months out of the bond funds. And because of the turnover that we've experienced in the last few years, it's a blessing and a curse that we hire such smart people that get promoted constantly. But I think that having that one position for 12 to 18 months will help us focus on creating the efficiencies that will make it a lot more manageable going forward. And I think that at the rate that people get trained and when other job openings appear, they apply for them, I don't expect that this is going to create a layoff or anything. I think it will just be natural attrition to go back down to having the 3 accounting generalists, 2 of whom are paid out of the finance budget and 1 from Norwich Public Schools.
Perfect, thank you.
And just to add to that, Josh's report that he just mentioned are in the minutes of the last ad hoc committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would just like to pass along some comments to you all. Last year, as you know, has been one I've never seen before. And prior to my 6th year here, I worked 32 years in banking. And interest rates are at historic lows, and obviously you see, what it's done to our investment income. It basically fell off the cliff last March. But just so you all know, the banks that we deal with are in good shape, okay? Over $250,000, we do not have insurance. So one of my functions is to review those banks and make sure that they're well capitalized, and they all are. They're in good shape. Liquidity-wise, we're in a good position that when rates rise, and goodness knows when that's going to be, it appears that the Fed and the global banks around the world are going to keep them at these lows at least for 1 to 2 years to come. I mean, these are really low. The most I can get right now with a 12-month maturity is about 40 basis points. And compare that back to when I was a kid, you got 5.5 on a regular savings account. So, but we're in a position that when rates rise, we can quickly jump into treasury obligations. And those reprice much quicker than what the banks do. So, we'll ride that out. But our yield now fell off the cliff. And I hear all these needs, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I could do more, but it ain't happening right now. So for the next year or two, it's going to be pretty much the same. And that's it.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, he answered my question.
You're all set.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. The assessor is out on sick leave, so she's not here tonight. We'll try to answer any questions you might have on the assessor. It's on page 58.
For discussion purposes, and for public who are here, anything new?
No. No, the assessors are kind of right staff now, they have 4.
Right.
They had 3 and 3.5 for a number of years, it wasn't the right amount. But they're at 4 now, and that seems to be a good staffing level for them to get their work accomplished.
Thank you. Members have questions? Nope, no questions, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So we're scheduled 7:30
Correct.
for the hearing, so I guess we can take a
10-minute break.
10-minute break before that.